Hey, this is a podcast from Occupy Radio on Student Radio in Bergen. Please feel free to leave your feedback and comments on our Facebook page, Occupy Radio Norway.
This is Occupy Radio with Anthony
and Mr. Paulie.
Hello, world. And what a wonderful world it is. And we want you to make it better for you and for me and us here at Occupy Radio. You know, I've got a cold, as you may hear, but I'm going to soldier on because it's that time of the week when I can hang out with Anthony.
Hello, everybody.
And the Occupy team, and of course that is Rune from the Occupy movement.
Hello.
And Vegard from the Zeitgeist movement.
Hello.
And I think Adrian's there in the background. Are you there?
G'day, Ade.
Hey. So this is Occupy Radio on Student Radio in Bergen. I'm Mr. Paulie, and I'm here with Anthony, of course, and the team. And you can listen to us on our Facebook page. You can listen to our podcast, on our Facebook page, which is called Occupy Radio Bergen. And, of course, our YouTube channel of the same name. Anthony?
Yeah?
Do you have a quote for us today?
I do. I want to start with a quote, as I normally like to do. And this is by Charles Darwin. And it's a little bit relevant to our show today. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change.
Oh, I think I know who did that. Was it Darwin?
Yeah, I just said that, though.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Have you got a quote, too?
Yeah, I've got a good one from another great pioneer.
And somebody with a great amount of intelligence?
Indeed.
Yeah?
The quote is, "It is clear that our nation is reliant upon big foreign oil. More and more of our imports come from overseas."
Oh, that was quite profound, wasn't it?
Yes, that was, of course.
Was that one of the Bushes?
It was indeed a Bush.
Yeah.
It was not Kate, it was George Bush. Now, what have we been doing previously on Occupy Radio, Anthony?
Why don't you enlighten us?
I will. After meeting Rune, of course, and Vegard in the last couple of weeks. Last week, we briefly discussed the various crises facing our planet today. So we delved deeper into the most pressing of these crises, which I guess, well, it was chosen to be climate change, and indeed it was a very fascinating discussion we had. We found out the planet has warmed by nearly 1 whole degree. Mm-hmm. And this has definitely been caused and worsened by human activity. 1 degree. It may not seem like much.
It doesn't, does it?
No. But it's already had an incredibly adverse effect on biodiversity and the ecosystems that feed us. According to a study by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, based in Switzerland, the current species extinction rate is estimated to be between 1,000 and 10,000 times higher than the natural or the background rate as it's known. And one of the worst offenders contributing to global warming is our increasing use of polluting sources of energy. And on Occupy Radio menu today, what have we got?
Ta-da!
We've got energy. Energy is our theme. I'm looking forward to that.
Me too.
This is
Who would have thunk it?
where Anthony enlightens us on some unthunkable headlines around the world. Anthony, what have you got for us?
The first one, actually, I'd like just some input from the boys here. Massive and violent protests by Muslims around the world against the film insulting the Prophet. Because it's gone everywhere. It's gone global. It was in Sydney. It was in, yeah.
Because I was going to do that about Justin Bieber's latest song as well, but, just didn't have the energy.
Yeah.
No, I heard that actually this film came out during the summer sometime, and that it didn't create a lot of attention back then, but now that someone might have just created some attention around it to stir up a conflict to
cause trouble.
Yeah, I heard some. This is indications in an article I read. It's of course speculation, but that the presidential campaign in the U.S., for instance, Republicans seem to get votes off of conflict situations since they're tough on everything. So there are speculations regarding that it's spread intentionally to stir up conflict to
to incite.
Yeah, and I heard the same about the Muhammad drawings, that they were originally also printed a long way before they were spread intentionally along with some fake photos and then stirred a lot of
So they were planted by...
You know.
Is it fair to
But it's
generalize?
speculation.
Is it fair to generalize that conservative parties tend to benefit from such conflicts?
Yeah, in a certain way they do, but we need to remember that this goes way back. A lot of people still remember Salman Rushdie, and his books are still being read. The book, especially Satanic Verses, was very controversial, and it started a lot of riots. But I think one of the main points here is that there is a polarization, and all political leaders, they tend to get extra energy and extra credit for being a part of a polarized situation.
Yeah, it's. I heard the same as Vegard, actually, that it was made actually years ago, not months ago, and that it was only released online. I mean, I don't know which one's true, but also, I mean, a point was made that, and I'm in no way anti-Muslim or anti-anything, but there's been so many parodies of Jesus Christ made, but you don't see protests and flag burnings and all kinds of things going on around the world.
I remember one when Life of Brian came out, and there was quite a lot of protest about that movie from Christians. Yeah. But that was in 1979, and it's quite different. And it was pretty weird, and most people there was actually some other people protesting against them, who were actually dressed up as, Monty Python characters.
And it was banned in Norway too, I think.
It was, yeah. Right, how about that?
Anyway, next unthinkable headline. This is far more unthinkable than that one. This is the headline. American man orders a TV online and receives an automatic weapon. What? This is absolutely true. In the wake of 2 mass killings in the USA, police are now investigating how a man who ordered a TV online could have received an automatic weapon instead. The man in Washington, D.C. called the police immediately, who advised him not to touch the weapon and that he could not return the weapon because it's illegal to transport an automatic weapon in a private vehicle, which makes the story even more curious as to how it was able to be delivered in the first place. So what do you reckon about that, boys? So much of this stuff happens in the USA, and I'm not sure I'd like to go there anymore.
Was it the same company that's selling both automatic weapons and TVs?
They don't even know. Well, the investigation is ongoing, but I don't really know anything more.
It came from the right company.
Yeah. So how did they put a weapon in there instead of a TV?
Yeah, but maybe they just missed shipping the TV because the automatic weapon is insurance. You get all of these idiot insurances here in Norway, but then it's just about money. But, America's very different.
It is.
Yeah, I think I saw once, I think it's in the Bowling for Columbine with, what's his name?
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore. Yeah. He took up a loan in the bank and received a free shotgun.
Yeah, if you open a bank account, you get a free shotgun.
Wait, there's more!
Ultimate insurance.
You get a Kalashnikov.
The poor old Americans. Actually, sometimes I feel if there are any Americans listening to our show that we are anti-American, and we're absolutely not. I've got a lot of good American friends. It's just, so much weird shit happens over there, and it's more the system that we're against.
Yeah, well, they hold the power, and, most people with power are pretty screwed up.
Anyway, another unthinkable?
Yeah, I was just thinking that would have been quite an embarrassing phone call to the company. Excuse me, sir. I ordered a TV and I got a shotgun. That would have been a really fun conversation to listen into.
Anyway, guns. We're on guns. We're on Army now. U.S. Army suicides reach a record monthly high in July. 26 active duty soldiers are believed to have committed suicide in July, more than double the number reported for June, and the most suicides ever recorded in a month since the US Army began tracking detailed statistics on such deaths. The first 7 months of this year, there were 116 suspected suicides among active duty soldiers, compared to with 165 suicides for all of last year. And I'm thinking, are they surprised? Really? I mean, it's now that it's only being reported. It's you're sending young men and women barely out of school, out into foreign countries to kill and maim other people, often civilians, for a cause they either don't understand or don't agree with.
I've got a question to the panel.
Yeah.
When was the last time that drafting happened in the US? And is it to some extent still happening, either via manipulation or
or the fact that people just need a job so bad they join the army.
I think the worst is that they take advantage of poor people not having jobs, and they offer them, you get a steady income for some years, your family can eat everything, and then you just have to take a little trip to Iraq and kill some other poor people for us billionaires.
But the last draft was Vietnam War, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah.
Same in Australia as well.
Yeah, but they got their asses handed to them, so they dropped the idea of drafting people because it was so unpopular.
So raise level of suicide in the US Army.
That was that, and here's the one that I find the most unthinkable, boys, and it's about the US elections. How can the US elections cost $6 billion? So that's 37 billion Norwegian kroner. That's right. That's how much it's going to cost after the election.
Altogether or
Altogether,
each?
that's both together.
Yeah.
I know, that was Clint Eastwood's fee for doing his speech.
Over the next 3 months, Romney and Obama will spend nearly $6 billion trying to get people to vote for them. At a time of economic recession where belt tightening is the order of the day for ordinary citizens, and in a country where around 45 million people are living in poverty, the two potential leaders of what they like to call the free world will spend the equivalent of the GDP of Moldova on mostly TV, radio and newspaper commercials, most of which are basically bashing their opponent, not providing solutions.
And American flags and posters, etc., etc. Have you seen some of those events?
I just think that it's important that here in Norway that we keep not allowing commercials on TV and radio for the political parties, because if we do, then probably the ones with the most money will
Exactly.
win the elections, and then you'll have this two-party. It's impossible for small parties who have no money to.
But you have in Norway and in most countries there are limits on how much you can contribute to a political party, and that's a really big debate in our country, Australia, at the moment. And the big companies are trying to get it in so they can contribute whatever they want, like is happening in USA.
Yeah, and the problem is that the big ones, they have the largest voice, so they from before. So it's
Yeah, but this is one of the reasons why Occupy started in the first place, that you have a crisis in the democratic system. But on another note, you can say that this is actually Keynesian economics, where you do fiscal stimulus. You stimulate the economy by pouring a lot of money into it, and you could say that it's kind of, it's helping.
It's helping
on the
advertising industry.
Exactly. It's creating GDP.
Yeah. Oh, well.
I've got a little unthunkable.
Hey, have you?
I do.
It's normally me that's got them.
Well, who would have thunk that? It's actually almost like a trivia question for you, Anthony, being the trivia king of this city.
Well, thank you.
World temperatures were above average for many, many months in a row recently. Still are.
Yeah.
How many straight months do you think that is?
I'd go with 3.
100.
330.
World temperatures have been above average for 330 straight months. So it was the, let me read a bit here. August 2012 was the 4th warmest August globally since 1880, and the 330th consecutive month in which temperatures worldwide were above the 20th century average.
But I wonder then, because they always say since a certain date. Is that since temperatures were being recorded? And secondly, why were temperatures so high back in 1870 or whenever it was as well? Like being, trying to see the other side.
I'm not quite sure what the average is based on. I know that global temperatures have been measured instrumentally since the 19th century sometime.
Okay.
But I don't know what the average is based on. Probably.
Yeah, but this is just 1 year.
Yeah, it's 1 year, whereas we're talking 300 months in a row. Yeah,
exactly.
The source is the U.S. National Climate.
So maybe we didn't scream loud enough in the last program.
Last week,
I'm sorry about that, people.
Everybody, if you didn't listen to our podcast or listen to the show last week, you can listen to the podcast on our Facebook group, Occupy Radio Norway.
Anthony, do you want to recap from last week for our audience?
If you like, we for the benefit of those people who have not heard our first few shows, we spoke about a convergence of crises and several real and present crises that are affecting the world today, and we thought we'd take them all individually. And last week we spoke about climate change, and this week we're going to talk about fossil fuel dependency, or fuel, or energy, if you like. And the energy crisis. And the energy crisis is directly related to the previous crisis, which is the environmental crisis. And in fact, all of the crises we're facing today and that we will talk about over the next months are related to each other, and they must be dealt with and solved in relation to each other. Climate change is a direct result of our dependence on the processing and burning of oil and gas. These are our number one energy sources, and not only that, these fuels are also used in everyday products like plastics, synthetics and clothes. And basically we are addicted to energy sources, and those energy sources which are slowly killing the earth. But then we talked about clean and renewable energies, of which there are a more plentiful supply on Earth. And there's so much money to be made from the dirty ones that we're not willing to make fundamental change. And Vegard finished up with a nice quote last week, and that is, the question more and more people are asking themselves is what the hell profitability has to do with anything if it's the future of mankind we are talking about. Maybe in the end, the only trace left of humanity will be a computer with a bank account containing gazillions of dollars. Runa, just to give us some kind of scale, can you tell us actually how big the oil industry is?
Well, I don't have an actual number for that. It's very much dependent on how you count, or if you want to add like services that are attached to the oil industry. But just to give you an example, the 6 biggest oil companies reported a first quarter result of $38 billion in 2011. That's just the first quarter. And if they were a country, if you put all of the 6 together and say it's a country, then it would rank 54th in just those 3 months. And if we would add that up to a year, then they would be 25th as a country, above Finland, Greece, Poland. So that's just the economic side of it. And if we consider its products, we could say that pretty much all of modern civilization depends on it, like you said. And so to actually change away from the polluting industries, we need to consider both energy dependency and its share of the world economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that even if it's 25th would be 25th on the list of countries based on GDP or something. But if you think of the influence and lobbying power the oil industry has, I think it's way above Finland, Greece and Poland. I think even it's more than the 3 countries combined, because it's spread out all over the world. So
it's very hard to say about the lobby industry, because they not only operating as registered lobbying companies, they also have a lot of ties with political people and have a lot of experts on their side.
And this actually goes a little bit back to what I was talking about in the unthinkable headlines of the amount of money that Romney and Obama will spend on their elections.
Yeah, we don't know how much is coming from oil companies.
Yeah.
We got no idea.
No.
Anyway, peak oil. A lot of us have heard about peak oil. Can you explain that for us a little bit?
It's a theory proposed in the 50s by a guy called Marion King Hubbard, mostly just called Hubbard or King Hubbard, stating that oil production peaks and declines in a certain shape resembling a bell curve. The main conclusion is that all oil reserves will be depleted at some time in the future.
I just want to comment on the bell curve shape. That comes from consuming a non-renewable resource or a finite resource with an exponentially increasing demand. So where for instance, have consumption growing with the percentage each year. And at a certain point, the increasing demand surpasses what can be supplied, and that's where you get the peak.
Okay, but every so often we read about a new oil find, especially in the North Sea, where we are here. And there was an article recently where the head of Statoil stated that oil will outlive us all. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that the theory of peak oil predicted the decline in American oil reserves, but on a global scale it's been very hard to predict because of differences in demand. but there are different ways of seeing this. For example, that technology has allowed for much deeper extraction of oil than we are used to be able to do, and we can also extract oil from sediment. And there's even talk of the possibility that oil reservoirs refill themselves.
When you say sediment, you mean those tar sands I've seen on TV and on YouTube? And
yeah, exactly.
If you haven't seen anything about tar sands, look it up. If you just type in tar sands or bituminous sands on YouTube,
and see how destructive it is.
It's pretty depressing stuff. It's pretty
Yeah.
ugly.
The scientific term for it is bitumen.
Okay, bitumen, yeah. Because it looks like tar, doesn't it, basically?
Yeah, and that's then you have the tar sands and you have the oil shale, and those are basically the same but different kind of qualities.
Yeah.
But this process of turning bitumen into oil, that's it wasn't a part of the peak oil theory.
All right, so that's separate from that.
Yeah,
peak oil
because
thing you were talking about before.
he was just concentrating on reservoirs.
All right.
Trying to find.
And tar sands are so destructive too. Like the public health impact is amazing. There's people. I've seen some figures here about not just humans but animals, or not just animals but humans. Higher rates of cancer among residents of the areas around near the tar sands place. By the way, it's tar sands, not Tarzan, as in tar, Tarsands. Also, apparently, there's a study in 2006 in this area where moose were found to have 453 times more the acceptable levels of arsenic in their systems than in other places.
Yeah.
So tar sands.
I saw once there was this guy who was traveling in the area to document the tar sands problem, and he said that he was recommended going in there not to eat any food that the locals bring you because it's toxic.
Yeah.
That's
The thing about the tar sand extraction or bitumen extraction is that you actually take the whole of the land. You just ruin it completely because you need to take out the actual sediments, and then you cook it, and then you extract oil from that through this process. But it leaves the land completely wasted. It looks like a dump.
But what about that fracking as well? What's that all about?
Well, fracking is a bit different process where you put water and you make explosions underground to frack up the sediment so it will release gas.
Frack comes from the word fracture, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I just want to correct you. I don't think they use any explosions, but it's a fluid under high pressure, so the pressure is high enough to crack the
but they also
sediment.
use detonations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't know that.
So the gas just seeps up, and then they hopefully get it into reservoirs where they can extract it from. But the thing is that the gas seeps anywhere. So it's, I don't know, you have to see a documentary called Gasland, where you can see what kind of destruction it makes. And
that's got nothing to do with our household, even, Mr. Paul.
Sounds a lot like Anthony's living room.
Yeah, but I have an example. I have an example from that movie because of that documentary. There was a guy who was drilling a water well, and then he had a gas blowout when he was drilling his water well because they had been doing fracking in the area around it.
And the gas had seeped into the water, artesian water.
Yeah, so
or
it just blew out the whole. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got something I was going to mention there after hearing what Mr. Pauly had to say, because I saw a National Geographic documentary the other day, and it was about the oil tar sand field, or whatever you call it, over there, and the way they managed to pass it through in Canada was they had to get the Indians on side, as in the Indians. Native Americans, sorry. And so they basically gave them a share in the company and made them all rich. But then there are many of them that are looking back and thinking, what have we done? And looking at the land and just...
If you can't serve food, for example, to visitors, imagine the CEO of the company going to visit the tar sands, the places, and someone offers him some food. He goes, no way, man, I wouldn't touch that stuff.
Yeah, but this is actually what I was going to say now, was on that documentary, the Indians, one of the Indians was allowed to keep a small parcel of land the way it was before, and it wasn't allowed to be touched. It was like an acre or something with his grandfather's house on it. Yeah. And he invited some of the oil bosses over for some food, and I don't know if it was local food or whatever, but anyway, they were just talking, and anyway, when they'd finished eating, he said, so what's going to happen when you've finished extracting all the oil from around here? The Indian asked the oil executive, you know, and the executive said, well, we'll just put it back the way it was before, you know, and it's just mind-boggling how it just it shows the amount of ecological ignorance amongst people at the top in companies and governments.
We'll plant some trees.
Yeah.
Then it'll all be the same again.
Yeah, because if you look at an ecosystem like that, to bring that back to the original state, it will be like creating life, and we have no technology still for creating life. We haven't accomplished that. So making it look the same as it did before for a while, compared to making it the way it was, is two very different things.
It is. Yeah, you have to basically be able to create millions of ecosystems as well as plant a few trees and some grass. Yeah. You said something before about refilling the oil or something like that, Runa. What were you talking about there?
What I've learned, and what most of us are taught in school, is that oil and gas are from decomposed material which has been processed over millions of years. And a major conclusion from this is that oil and gas is a finite resource.
That's why they call them fossil fuels, right?
Exactly. So the alternative theories that are coming out now is that, and there are a state of degassing from the Earth's core, which is combined with certain process inside the Earth, which creates oil and gas. It's not from the oiled dinosaurs.
Okay.
But this is very, very controversial. But we need to acknowledge the fact that peak oil isn't applicable to today's findings, and there's actually plenty of oil. Because
so there could be thousands of years of oil left, yeah?
Yeah, it looks that way from the findings and the way that the supply actually has been rising steadily since the 1980s.
It's who controls the oil, I guess, which is an important factor.
Yeah, it seems that way. That some people want us to believe that there is a shortage of oil, but we do have a lot of demand for it. So that also plays into the price of oil and gas. But we still have a lot of way to go to gather enough understanding of how and where to look for oil. And the new technologies in extraction and the prices, that it creates the possibility that there's more enough oil and gas to last as a primary resource for much longer than we previously envisioned.
Yeah, but we're actually talking about the oil or the energy crisis, and if we have 1,000 years of oil left, this could not only solve the energy crisis but stop the need for oil-based wars, and maybe the price will come down and all will be well again.
Yeah. Well, I wished it would be that simple. But it isn't, because last time we talked about climate change, that it's a real big gamble to say that the 1% or 0.5% chance that it's not human made. We can't really afford to go with such a gamble. No.
The risk is too big.
Yeah, the risk is just enormous, and having this much oil, it will delay any transition to renewable energy for a considerable amount of time, and it's should be considered a tragedy for anyone who has any environmental or climate concerns, and that should be all of us. And this means that the playing field has been changed, that earlier we could be much more lax about stating that peak oil will force a transition to renewables. Now that excuse isn't there anymore, so we need to wake up and understand what's really at stake here.
Yeah, so what you're saying is the real reason why a transition is needed is environmental only, but that's a pretty big reason.
Yeah, it's first and foremost, but there are other reasons as well.
I have a good quote there that's relevant, and it is I really like this one. The Stone Age didn't end for lack of stone. And I did some digging, and I found that it might actually come from Sheikh Ahmed Saki Yamani, a Saudi oil minister during the 70s. And it said in an article I found that the full quote is, "The Stone Age didn't end for lack of stone, and the oil age will end long before the world runs out of oil." So if oil is a non-renewable resource, it will peak someday, even if it's difficult to say when. But if it's not, it won't peak, or it will take a lot longer, depending on whether we are in balance with the rate of renewal or not. But based on the effects on climate and environment, we still have to shift to renewables. And if we agree on that, then what are we waiting for?
And you're on student radio. That's SRIB.NO. You can actually look at us on our Facebook page, which is called Occupy Radio Norway.
You look particularly handsome there too, Mr. Paulie, I must say.
Thank you. It's lucky we're on the radio, I guess, really. And also you can also access us on our YouTube channel.
And Facebook page.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Did you?
But you were too busy looking at me saying how good I looked. I do look good today, I have to say. That doesn't happen very often. But anyway, which is why I chose a career in radio, of course. Anyway, Occupy Radio. Anthony, what were we talking about? We were talking about energy politics, of course.
We were talking about energy, and now we're actually going to talk about the politics behind energy. And Runa just finished by saying that there's possibly a lot more fossil fuels out there than we originally thought. And so the transition to cleaner sources of energy could take even longer. And it's the politicians that decide, and they don't have a very good track record so far. But don't you think you're wearing your cynical boots again, Runa? Look at the wind farms in Denmark. You fly over them every time you fly down to the continent. And the solar farms in China, and tidal and wave energy now being used in Great Britain.
Yeah, they look great in different articles, and they're very visible. But alternative energy is still very much in the making and fighting an uphill battle. And this is primarily on the basis of they need subsidies and policies to become economically viable. And the global numbers for 2010 is that only 66 billion go to renewables, while the estimates for traditional fuels is 750 billion to $1 trillion.
That's in subsidies.
Yes, it is.
It's more than 10 times.
Yeah.
Yep.
Subsidy government. But which countries are we talking about here? Is it just the USA or?
We are talking a lot about the new developing up-and-coming economies, because they need to get their factories and their industry going. So they need to actually stimulate oil.
So Anthony's not really being totally cynical, is he?
No, I think the hallmark of a cynic, because I take that to me. I'm not being offended, but I think that we need to make and differentiate between a cynic and a realist, and the hallmark of a cynic is one-sided negativity. So there's a lot of negativity shrouding what we're talking about, but that actually comes from the actual problems and possible scenario outcomes of what we're talking about. So we can't afford to not be realistic and talk about all the bad stuff that is happening and will be happening. But on another note, I need to correct the story from last week, if that's okay, because I told you that President Ronald Reagan tore down the solar panels once he got into the White House.
The solar panels that Carter put up?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But that didn't happen until 1986, and that was in the middle of his second term in office. And by that time, though, he had gutted the budget for research and development of renewables in the U.S. Department of Energy.
Why would Ronnie do that? Wasn't he a nice guy?
Oh, he was a top bloke,
and
Ronnie.
a great actor as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he should have stuck to acting.
Yeah,
Did you hear about his typewriter?
No.
It had no memory and no colon.
Oh. Okay. Ronald Reagan, he is very much adored today, but We tend to forget that Jimmy Carter, when he was in office, he was still remembering the OPEC oil embargo in 1973, when the oil prices rose sharply, and he wanted to look for alternatives to oil and gas, because he saw the nation's dependency on foreign oil as something dangerous, geopolitically, environmentally, and economically. And that makes a lot of sense if you look at what's happening today. But Reagan, on the other hand, he believed that any shortages would be dealt with by the resilience of a thriving market. So, and that geopolitics was a game that could be won, and that the environment was actually a bad word.
It could be won through Star Wars, maybe.
Yeah, so I think it might be prudent to recall a couple of his infamous quotes. The first one is that trees cause more pollution than automobiles do.
Can I say, trees cause more pollution than automobiles do? Oh, that was too New York, and it wasn't very good.
What was his argumentation for that one?
It was actually that yes, trees do create CO2.
Yeah,
but they don't pollute nearly. Contribute in the same way as...
It's minuscule. Yeah.
It's a total lack of understanding for natural processes.
Completely. And
what else did he say? You got any other gems?
Yeah, he also said that if you've seen one tree, you've seen them all.
Seen one car?
Yeah.
Seen them all.
Sounds like Jimmy Carter, though, was maybe one of the most environmentally conscious presidents of our age.
Well, I would say that he was on the right track. And that the political climate of the 80s and onwards completely ruined it, with Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher going completely for the neoliberalist kind of thinking. But Jimmy Carter, he had a plan for energy and was willing to ask the American people to take responsibility. But unlucky for the planet, they chose to go for lower prices, oil prices, and less concerns about the future. But the basic principles in his plan for energy is basically the same kind of thinking that we apply when we discuss alternative energy politics today. And that is take responsibility, consume less, plan ahead, and develop ways of tapping into renewables. So in that sense, I think we should give him the respect that he deserves.
A cynic might say it's no surprise that he only had one term in office as well, perhaps.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about energy today, the energy crisis. Now we're going to discuss alternative energy sources. And when we discussed the convergence of crises, Vegard mentioned actually a lot of alternative sources of energy. Can you go through them now?
Yeah. And of course, this is my point of view, my understanding of how it is. The renewable energy with the biggest potential are solar, wind, wave, tidal, and geothermal. But before I go into each of these in more detail, I would like to say something about distributed versus centralized energy production, if that's okay with you guys.
I think it's a good idea to do that. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's...
Go to town.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's fairly relevant. The basic point I want to make is that energy should be produced locally on a small scale, instead of in big power plants built and operated by the state or some large energy corporation. And you can compare it to what the printing press and internet have done for information sharing. Before Gutenberg, information in the West was written down and copied by hand, usually by monks. And it was mostly in the form of religious texts. And the invention of the printing press made information more readily available and easier to spread. And in our time, internet has further revolutionized the sharing of information. So now it's possible to share information instantly over large distances. Information sharing has gone from highly centralized to highly distributed. And this makes it highly efficient and very robust, and we need the same from our energy system.
Yeah, well, about information, it's not only efficient and robust, but everybody can participate in everything they want to, any time they want to, and it means everybody's doing it, leading to more expression, creativity and transparency. And I can see the same thing happening with energy. But while we're on that, can you give us a bit more insight into each of these renewable sources, Dr. Vegard?
Yeah, I can do my best at least. I'll start off with solar energy. And there are two ways of harvesting solar energy directly. That's by photovoltaic cells, better known as solar cells, and also by solar collectors. The solar cells can be set up as big solar farms, and that's the centralized form. Or you can do it on roofs of people's houses, public buildings, and so on. And that's the distributed form. Solar collectors can be mirrors focusing the rays from the sun on a tower to produce steam. In a power plant, that's the centralized form. And you can have solar cookers, parabolic mirrors focusing rays from the sun to power a Stirling engine, or solar collectors in the form of water heaters or for domestic use. That's more distributed.
What about dark, depressing countries like Norway? Can you have solar panels on your roof there?
Yeah, actually, on average, the surface of the planet receives 100 watts per square meter. So even in Norway, you can have large benefits from using solar panels.
Yeah, my mum, she lives in Adelaide, in South Australia, and that's basically the same as southern Spain. You know, lots and lots of sun, and she has solar panels on her roof. That's quite normal there. I was just wondering, can it be done worldwide?
It can have, and the thing that it's free energy. It comes straight from the sun. If you not use it, it's going to heat up the environment. So there's no downside to using every little bit coming down. As long as if you can afford a solar panel, put one up. It will help.
So you're saying there are no downsides, or can
of course,
the optimist.
It depends how you see it. The big advantage with solar energy is that it can easily supply the world's needs based on availability. And solar cells today, they're made mainly from silicon, which is it's sand, so no danger of running out of the raw materials. But the real disadvantage, one disadvantage with solar cells is that they are energy intensive to produce. But then again, if you look at it, that's relative. If you look at it in how much it actually takes, you can take look at the payback time for energy. And that is the amount of time the cell needs to produce the same amount of energy that went into the production of the cell. And that's less than 7 years.
Yeah, but I've heard also, that's good and well, but I've heard about the cost, and, 10 or 20 years ago, it was just it's far too expensive to even put solar cells on your roof. Yeah,
that's the real problem, that they are expensive, but that has more to do with an economic and political system that isn't working. I've seen that if solar energy received as much subsidies as fossil fuels, it would be cheaper than grid power in the entire US.
But there is a lot of stuff happening now with China actually producing solar panels a lot cheaper, and they have way overproduction capacity. So they can actually just start feeding us with this stuff. But the EU and the Americans, they don't like it because it outcompetes.
And just to go on about advantages, disadvantages, solar collectors are basically dark materials and mirrors, so they're not especially energy intensive to produce. Their biggest disadvantage is probably that people don't like the way they look, and that's always a problem.
Oh, okay, so solar collectors are big, black, ugly-looking things which people don't want destroying their nice landscape, I guess, as opposed to those lovely-looking oil pumps littering the Californian landscape, or the absolutely gorgeous oil platforms in our oceans, or the stunning, splendiferous, breathtakingly sublime Canadian tar sandfields that we were talking about earlier.
Anthony's getting on his high horse again. No, those tar sand things. Ugh.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry about
Ugly
that.
as FUC.
Yeah, but they've been there for a while, so people are used to them. Okay. This is new things.
If you can't even eat the food from around, then I'm out.
Yeah.
That's where I draw the line.
Yeah, if I'm going to go on...
Tell us about wind farms.
Yeah, wind farms. Wind farms is what you hear most talk about, and that's, of course, the centralized form, where you take huge areas and use them to set up many large wind turbines, usually of the three-blade type that rotates horizontally. But alternatively, people can put up smaller wind turbines in their backyard. For instance, more and more vertical wind turbines are being developed that use simpler technology and can harvest wind closer to the ground. And there's also research that shows that vertical turbines can be placed closer together, so that wind farms using vertical wind turbines instead of horizontal ones can be more efficient, even though the efficiency for a standalone vertical turbine is lower than for a horizontal one. Yeah. And that's because the big horizontal wind turbines create so much turbulence, so you have to space them far apart.
There's that too, and also birds and bats and things we were talking about in the last episode. that were being killed. But and I've seen the wind farms flying over Denmark and some standalone windmills in Australia. They're not particularly attractive, but at least the energy's clean.
Yeah, in terms of pros and cons, the energy payback for conventional wind farms is, what I've found, it's less than a year. So they pay themselves back really quickly. In terms of materials, there are lots of oil platforms to recycle, so that's no problem. And for large wind farms, as you say, there's a danger to birds. And that will be less for wind farms using vertical turbines, because there are no blades that are suddenly swinging in from above or below. And in people's backyards, I don't think it will be a problem. But then they are ugly and noisy, and it's a NIMBY thing, not in my backyard.
Yeah, of course.
But I think the vertical wind turbines are less noisy. But seriously, it's just people scared of change, in my opinion. And cars are also ugly and make noise, and they ruin the planet as well. So
all of the smog we're
altogether
sucking in every day from car fumes.
Smell.
I've also heard of adverse effects on people's health that live close to windmills, but it's probably no worse than living beside a coal-generated power station. I think I'd rather live beside a few windmills.
Yeah, at least they don't, grow extra heads and stuff.
What about waves and tide?
Yeah, wave and tidal energy, they are a bit harder to harvest in distributed form, because they need more expensive equipment and extensive supporting structures. And of course, you need to be close to the ocean. But some of the emergent technology might be more suited for distributed energy production after further development. When it comes to wave power, it can be harvested either through a water turbine, through an air turbine where the motion of the waves are transferred to the air, or through some kind of hydraulic system where, for instance, the piston moved up and down by the waves' motion drives the hydraulic fluid through a generator of some kind.
Okay.
When it comes to tidal energy, it can be harvested by submerged turbines, and they look almost the same as wind turbines, or through tidal dams placed at points where water flows in at high tide and out at low tide. And there you can use, for instance, bidirectional water turbine or something like that. The biggest problem for both wave power and tidal energy so far has been finding ways of harvesting the forces of the waves and tide without breaking the equipment. Other than that, I think finding money to do it is the biggest problem.
So again, it's a question of money and priorities. I wonder if anybody has done the study on the cost of building an oil well as opposed to a bunch of windmills or tidal turbines. Anyway, Vegard, you mentioned geothermal before. Do you have to be in a country such as Iceland, where I've just been and saw a lot of geothermal energy being used, or New Zealand, or somewhere where there are lots of volcanic activities? Yeah.
If you're not in a place like that, you have to drill deeper, and that's the centralized way of doing it, the big power station with deep drilled holes. But you could do it more distributed with what they call heat wells. You just drill like 50 meters down on the ground, and then you use heat pumps. That's a conventional commercial technology, and then you can produce electricity or hot water for heating. And you can also you can extract heat during cold periods and put it back, reversing the system in warm periods, so you can also use it for cooling in the summer. So the biggest disadvantage is that you will only be subsidized when you drill holes for oil and gas, not when you drill for heat.
Okay, yeah, but if the government of Norway stops subsidizing their oil industry, won't the entire economy collapse?
Absolutely not. They need the subsidies to be super profitable when they can just be profitable. And the less profitable oil and gas is, the easier it is to switch to renewables. According to IPCC, renewable energy can supply 80% of the world's needs by 2050. But the problem is that they are considering the centralized forms of energy production. And they also consider current use or increase in use. And maybe most importantly, they assume business as usual when it comes to how our economic and political systems work. Distributed energy production can probably supply today's consumption, but the thing is that it doesn't need to. If we use energy more efficiently, we will reduce the total consumption.
So pretty much it gets back to what the groups like the Zeitgeist movement, the resource-based economy movement, the Occupy movement, FRÖ, all advocating. Everything is interrelated, so there must be systematic change.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Anthony, and we'll get to that a bit later. But I want to continue on the energy efficiency, or more efficient use of energy, for a little while. I think the key points there are smarter houses and buildings, more holistic, synergetic thinking, and energy storage technology. I recently heard about this house built in Germany that produces enough energy to power itself, but also 2 electric cars and a few electric bicycles. And also heard about a planned factory in Chicago that will produce tea, fish, vegetables, and beer.
Hey, that's me. That's all I eat and drink.
And it's off the grid with no waste, so it's integrated with a more holistic system. And
There'd
also
be some waste, mate. There would be some waste, but it wouldn't be coming out of the house.
Yeah, right. And regarding energy storage technology, there's some guys at MIT in the US developing a battery based on technology used for melting aluminium. And it's made it's made to be cheap and fully scalable, just to be suited for an energy storage system. And so the solutions are there, or they are coming, but we have to make it easier for them.
And that's all well and good, but of course we can't deny that we need transport and machinery. We need fuel for running these things.
Doesn't that need stronger fuel or stronger energy?
No, it doesn't. When I said earlier that renewable energy can supply all the world's needs, that of course includes all forms of transport. And eventually I think all vehicles will be electric. But before we get there, there are alternatives like biofuels that are more clean than fossil fuels. At least they have no net emission of CO2. But since we talked about in previous shows that we have to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, so the sooner we transition to full electrical transport, the better.
Mm. And thank you very, very much there for that roundup of, I shouldn't say roundup, should I, of renewable energies there from Dr. Vergaard. And it was quite involved, and there was a lot of big words there, wasn't there?
It's heavy stuff. I think we need a bit of light relief.
Yeah, but people can remember, listen to the podcast, because it is very important, all of it, and very relevant.
You can press pause on your whatever machine you have.
And digest it.
Yes. And you can reverse it and listen to Dr. Vergaard again.
There's one energy that hadn't been mentioned, and that's nuclear energy.
Mm.
Isn't that CO2 free?
It's CO2 free, but it's not renewable. So I was talking about renewable energies, and nuclear energy is based on like uranium, and that's not renewable. It might last a long time, but it will run out. But the biggest problems with nuclear power is the waste and, of course, the risk of accidents. Just look at what happened in Japan recently. Clean renewable energy is much safer and can power the world alone, so why should we use nuclear? And I think this is a part of the energy crisis thinking, that people think that we need nuclear energy to avoid a crisis. But that's just not the case. And I think the money needed to develop technology that can make nuclear more safe and the nuclear waste less radioactive, which is there's lots of research going into that. And I think that money is better spent subsidizing renewable energies.
Do you think it might have something to do with that nuclear energy can be a massive source of income for companies that, companies themselves, which we have seen are the ones who are contributing most to the not only the energy crisis, but the climate crisis as well. But any old person, you or me or Paulie or Runa, could stick a solar panel on their roof or a windmill in their backyard, or maybe produce it through their poo, like we talked about in the last show.
Yes.
Yeah, and we should, but that's an important point.
Speaking of ugly. Sorry.
Yeah, no, nuclear energy is highly centralized, so thanks for reminding me of that.
Speaking of centralized, there were 2 nuclear champions who have lately cut down their support for the nuclear program.
And they are?
Any ideas?
Germany
and Japan.
Japan being the obvious one for the reason of the post-tsunami.
Well, is it going to be... I know France were really into it because they blew up a few islands out in the Pacific back in when was that, in the 50s or something, wasn't
50s all the way up to the 80s and 90s, I think. So Japan's decided to phase out its plants, and because Japan produced more than 10% of global nuclear power before. So looking forward to seeing that. Now, I just want to ask an open question to you guys, I guess. The panel, as I call it. How come this transition is taking so long? I've just given you kind of good news there about Japan phasing it out. But what's happening? Why is it taking so long?
I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think, firstly, the politicians are too wound up in old ways of thinking. You talked about the centralized forms. Then we also talked about how the economy of traditional energy is so big. You can't just stop doing it, and then you can't just take away the subsidies and not expect to be in a bar brawl.
Yeah, well, that's why
So-
we use the word transition, because transition means over a period of time. And I guess I would have thought it'd probably take maybe 50 to 100 years.
Yeah, but a lot of the young generation, they are being greenwashed into believing that there's some technology on the brink of just saving us from that. You can still use fossil fuels, and then bada-bum.
Yeah.
A good example there is the carbon storage technology. And in my opinion, it's dead, because even if you can store a lot of carbon or a lot of CO2, it actually looks like we can't, because no one is building the pipelines to transport the CO2, and nobody is really doing anything to make it possible. So it's just we are still in the greenwashing thing. We are still just greenwashing and saying, yeah, we can go on like before. We have to make some small modifications, but we can largely go on as we have for a long time. And that hasn't changed really in the political arena yet.
And hence public opinion is not exactly enthusiastic all the time, I guess.
No, I think people need to actually start changing their ways of thinking about the system, not just about their habits, because that's where their priorities go. They think, oh, I need a new car, maybe I'll buy an electric. And so they buy an electric and think, oh, that's good, now I contributed my part. But then they forget about it's the whole system itself.
And they're driving to their job at Statoil, for example.
For instance.
Yeah, I've been thinking about if all the people working at Statoil stopped driving to work, how much gas would you save? Like they are driving to work.
But
to get
come
up
on,
more
that's
to
completely
power.
utopian. Then people would be driving bicycles in hails, in storm hails, and
Yeah, it's not.
ice
But-
and snow.
But you could.
This is Norway. Come
yeah,
on.
yeah, but you could have, you could distribute the working place more, because now you mostly work using a computer, so you don't really have to go to another place, like travel 20 kilometers
To sit
by
in a
car.
cubicle and,
just to sit by
yeah,
your
be bored
computer
shitless
and communicate over the internet
But
with.
what about the Christmas parties, You got to get to know
Where
your
we
workers.
okay,
Yeah,
you
but
can
you don't
take
have the
bus.
Christmas. Yeah, you don't
But
have the
still,
Christmas.
people still do have the need to meet each other face to face, and we also have that problem where we try to work online, but we still need to look each other in the eyes when we're doing this show and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. But we have been talking about an idea called telecommuting. So if you have all these people going across town to get to their workplaces, but if you had these local telecommuting centers where people came from all different companies, but it was an office space where people sat together, working for different companies, telecommuting to work. So you just went to your local telecommuting center instead of traveling all the way to your company's office or something.
Well, that would
Then you would have
certainly,
the social atmosphere
Aspect as
of
well, yeah.
of a working place, but you could still didn't have to travel that far.
Although we've actually done that, we've been outsourcing all of these support phones to India, whatever. So we're already in that transition, but we're still producing a lot of goods, and what you're getting thrown at you just about everywhere you go, you get some kind of commercial or ad just slapped on your ear or stuck in your eye, which is telling you to buy stuff. Buy more stuff.
Absolutely, the commercial system what's it?
But hey, I'm supposed to be the cynic here.
Yeah, but I mean, we have people listening to us hopefully as well. And what do you think they can do? I mean, all the Karis and Jans out there that are listening, and suddenly we've shot them down in flames because they were going to buy an electric car, and now they don't reckon it's any use. Or, what can the listeners out there do?
I think they should buy an electric car and go buy a solar panel and go buy a heat pump and
buy
try
a bicycle.
Buy an electric bicycle so we can, when on those days it's possible to walk outside without being
Bombarded with
yeah.
rain. Yeah.
you can.
Yeah,
you
but
can
the problem
use
is that they are actually buying themselves a good conscience, which I see all the time. And a lot of the people that come to Occupy, which haven't come back, they are saying a lot of nice things, but they're not showing any actions for it.
Okay, but Runa, what do you suggest they do then?
That they start to get their heads out of the sand and realize that if I really mean anything about what I'm saying, then I actually need to start working for it.
And you're on Occupy Radio with the cynic and the utopian here.
And we've been talking about the energy crisis. And to sum things up, Mr. Paulie Vegarden-Runa, we have a world addicted to sources of energy that are destroying the planet. It also seems as though the planet has far larger quantities of these polluting fuels than we originally thought. The various governments of the world are far too slow in making the transition to cleaner sources of energy because they either don't see any economic viability in it or they're too distracted by other crises to make it a priority. Rich oil companies who have a vested interest in keeping things the same and who are the worst polluters of our oceans, rivers and lands have a lot of power over the governments of the world, which nearly guarantees that nothing will change soon. Unfortunately, oil production is also inextricably tied to our food production and distribution and many other everyday consumer products. It seems like a hopeless situation, Runa. What can we do?
Well, I might just have to put on my nurse voice when I tell the youth about reality, and that the hardest part of kicking an addiction isn't actually stopping doing the bad stuff, but starting something new and replacing your old habits with the new ones. Mm-hmm. But that kind of action always starts inside the hearts and minds of people, and whoever thinks that polluting energy forms should be abolished has to actually believe that it needs to change, and then start looking for answers. Like in Norway, we don't believe in the need because we can't feel it.
It's too good here, isn't it?
Yeah, we are used to bad weather. We have enough food on the table. We have enough jobs to go around, and someone somewhere will take care of us. And take care of the situation. And life is just easy for us, and we feel that our needs are being met every day. But the thing is, if we just expand our vision and think ahead, our choice is actually very, very simple. That do we want a dark, muddy planet, or do we want a lush, green and blue planet?
Yeah. Dark money doesn't really sell to tourists, for example, does it?
No, it shouldn't, but we just need to see that, because that is what is actually happening. And people need to wake up to the reality that we can't use oil, gas and coal and at the same time expect that things will work out. There's no technology to fix this. There's no politician strong enough to actually stand up, and there's certainly no time to waste. So the choice is upon us now, and the choice we make will be in our actions. If you are serious, then you can start right now, where you are, by eating less meat, drive less to work, buy locally produced goods. But if you are really serious about making a difference, then you need to get together with other people who are like-minded and start working for an actual change.
And I can...
Runa, you're on fire today.
Yeah.
Yes, I was speechless myself. I felt like clapping. But
I felt we should have had some Hollywood music behind you there, mate.
Anyway, if you want to be a part of the change that Runa's been talking about, then you can join up with the boys and girls in the Occupy movement or the Zeitgeist movement or FRER or all three of those, and meet up with the growing group that meet every Thursday at 7 o'clock, isn't it, boys? 7 o'clock every Thursday at Batteria, or 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturdays at Batteria. And Batteria is in Kongoskesgata, right next to the hipster shop.
Yep, number 26.
Yes.
Till someone's.
And if you're overseas, come to Bergen. We want to meet you.
Yeah,
it's a great place.
Or put something on the Facebook wall.
Yeah, do that.
You can also find local chapters of both the Occupy movement and the Zeitgeist movement on their international web pages.
Mr. Paulie, it's time for Science and Tech Breakthrough of the Week.
That was pretty weak.
And I actually had a couple, but we don't have much time, so I'm just going to tell you about one. And since we've been talking about oil, and we've been speaking to Dud Bobley of BP, and about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill that happened a few years back, although Dud was more interested in talking about, the half-yearly profits and dividends and bonuses. It's an ill wind that blows no good, Mr. Paulie.
Do you want me to do a wind sound?
No. Was it going to come out of your mouth or?
Who knows?
Right. Anyway, it looks like something good may have come from the catastrophe in the Gulf of Mexico, and possibly the only good thing to come out of the subsequent increase in research into finding more effective ways to clean up oil spills. And there've been a number of breakthroughs, but the most promising is a new method devised by researchers at MIT. Who propose separating oil and water using magnets. And this new technique would allow the oil to be recovered as well to help offset the cost of the cleanup. So Dud is going to love that. Not only will he be able to clean up the oil, but he'll be able to recover it all as well and sell it.
Wouldn't it make sense if the oil companies actually spent all the effort doing this? Do they do that?
Well, some of the money, I mean, they have promised money into research, and I guess some of that is funded it.
They wait until the technology has been patented, and it's a company that they can buy and make money off of.
And then they say it's them that's doing it.
They did that, I think, BP. They bought just a large cleanup company.
That's about all we've got time for today. You've been listening to Occupy Radio and Student Radio in Bergen with Vegard, Runa, Anthony and Mr. Paulie, and we'll catch you next week, 12:30 on Friday.